Well, it looks like maybe we'll get a few more people to come in, but thank you for attending this this talk. And today we have Angela Risius, and she's from the Orthogonal Research and Education Lab. And also she runs a startup called Make Truth Matter Again, which is a way of fighting online disinformation. That's the website right there. And she's going to talk to us today about data trusts, a solution to our mass data and collection discontent. So today is IT Pro Forum and a couple other events on campus. So I didn't want to, maybe we're not going to have as many people today, but I just wanted to welcome Angela to the talk series. And this looks to be a pretty interesting talk. It's going to involve a lot of economics. It's going to involve a lot of debt law and tech. So let me stop sharing. And Angela, if you would like to share your screen, you can go ahead.
Thank you. Yep. Wow, to fight the monsters of the future, we'll need everything we've got. Can everyone see this screen, my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Data trusts. So why data trusts? So it is a structure whereby data is placed under the control of a board of trustees with a fiduciary, aka trust-related responsibility to look after the interests of the beneficiaries, which would be us. There are many working definitions of data trust. Here are a few. The one that it doesn't particularly matter which one right now. They're mostly interchangeable. So the issue with mass data collection is that companies decide what to collect and for what purpose. The purpose is usually not to our best interest. Harms are collective, benefits private, and consequences are really hard for the average Joe to understand, if even the company understands it or has thought it out, right? Who gets to make decisions about our data? Usually a corporation. That's in quotes for a certain reason, like the director of a corporation has fiduciary responsibility to act in the interest of their shareholders. So the bottom line, their job is not to ensure your privacy or to make data available for the public good. I mean, those are, I'm sure they're not against any of that, but if it ever conflicts with the bottom line, their incentives are clearly to go for that, right? So there are several solutions to this. Maybe we could divorce those who wish to use the data from those who control its use, which is what personal data stores does, which it places the data with the internet user instead of the service provider. But the average user still wouldn't know what to do with that data, right? You would have decision fatigue, like, oh no, there's so many choices, analysis paralysis. And data is shared. So your sharing data affects me. So even if I decide like, okay, you know what, I'm going to be an isolationist island here, everyone else around me, it's gonna affect, like their data affects me. Yeah, if I am in that particular demographic or area, etc. And there is an enormous power imbalance between the corporations and the user, because Facebook's not gonna cry if you deactivate or delete for, like basically everyone is disposable, and that's really, really bad for bargaining power. Here is a nice and handy chart that I found, which tells you like, okay, which data governance structure is best for you. Has the data already been collected? Yes. Does this collected data give rise to personal rights? Yes. Then you can choose a bunch of these options. The one that I'm going to talk about is under the data commons one. And data commons is in which you basically put all the data from these public data sets to like an open knowledge repository. And a particular subset of that is called data trusts, in which like it allows for governance of these data commons. It allows individuals or groups to hand over their data or data rights to a board of trustees who will govern it on their behalf and on the behalf of the beneficiaries of the data trust. And how does this solve the mass data collection problems? So for your data privacy concerns, right now, when you share your DNA with 23andMe, it reveals a lot about your family's genetic makeup. And what you share on social media can influence your friends' insurance premiums. Your income statements can affect your neighbor's ability to obtain a loan. So should sharing this information be solely up to you? Mhm. If it has such, massive widespread consequences. For social mobile applications, it's particularly dangerous because in a recent study, it showed that more than 60% of these VPN apps require dangerous permissions that are not needed for them to function, which pose a risk to users' privacy by allowing access to these sensitive information. And these are completely unnecessary permissions, but no one reads the terms and conditions, right? 90% of free apps on the Google Play Store share data with organizations. That's a lot. That's like the great majority. Yikes. The key elements of a data trust. So the first is that it has to meet all legal requirements, of course, including GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations in Europe. Mhm. They also need an accountable governing body to ensure that it achieves its stated purpose. Comprehensive data management, including clear processes responsible for these collection, and training and accountability requirements for all data users, and ongoing public and stakeholder engagement, basically dynamic consent. Okay, the 12 minimum specifications to make a data trust. The first is legal. The data trust has to be legal. The second, the government's portion of it is the data trust must have a stated purpose. What values is it supposed to fall under? And the data trust must be transparent in its activities. It must have an accountable governing body to hold it accountable, and it must be adaptive to the environment and the emerging tech environment that is very rapidly changing. Management. There must be well-defined policies and processes for the collection, storage, use, and disclosure of data. If it's ill-defined, that is a lot of data at stake. Policies and processes must include data protection safeguards, which are reviewed and updated regularly. Due to the speed of emerging tech these days, it has to be reviewed and updated regularly. So we have to design it to make it adaptable, basically. And like I said, there must be an ongoing process to identify, assess, and manage risks. Because at the end of the day, the goal is to make sure that people aren't hurt. The data user requirements. All data users must complete training before they access data so they know exactly how to not screw this up or if it's right for them. All data users must agree to a data user agreement that acknowledges that data use will be monitored and includes consequences for non-compliance. Right now, for most terms and services, people they agree to it, but how many read it? Probably none of you. If you do, props to you. But yeah, we need a way to have them actually understand, and that way that we will say there will be consequences for non-compliance because they would not be the only person who is affected if something goes wrong. And public and stakeholder engagement. There must be early and ongoing engagement with stakeholders, including members of the public, especially the most disenfranchised. Yeah. Where there is a reasonable expectation that specific subpopulations or groups would have a particular interest in or would be affected by an activity of the data trust, there must be direct engagement tailored for that subpopulation or group. So say the data trust is going to do something that's going to affect a certain subpopulation. Like right now, there's nothing stopping companies from just making the action, right? But with a data trust, they would have to have some way to make sure that that group's voice is taken into account. Additional points of consideration that's not like minimum specifications, but important to consider is that we're international. So cross-border data trusts will need to identify multiple legal requirements and ensure that governance addresses all of them. Like the most obvious one I can think of is the General Data Protection Regulations for Europe. They have protections that Free Speech USA does not necessarily have. So if someone were to make a data trust in the US and wanted to be international, they would have to consider like GDPR as well. Another point of consideration, there are binding terms and conditions in data sharing agreements between legal entities when data are shared. And last but not least, for research ethic boards and such, there will be project-specific requirements in those for obtaining consent from data subjects. Yeah. Here's a nice handy chart on everything that you could consider while making your data trust or designing it. Like, how would you fund it? How would you execute the organization? Because you could even have it be state run. So the decision-making mechanism, you could have an aggregation of individual preferences, a voting of representatives, or a majority voting by beneficiaries. The default setting, I particularly like this one. Instead of just opt-in or opt-out, consent champions is the average of actively chosen settings by people who do choose settings. Yeah. So negotiation objectives is what they should maximize in negotiations with data using organizations. Like, what is the value that they're trying to go for, right? Data monetization, should it be monetized? Benefit distribution, how should the benefits be distributed and how the performance is assessed? So how are decisions made within the trust? Okay, here is some important questions, and I do not know the answer. It is up to you guys, and there's a link at the end if you want to sign up to make your own data trust. What decision does the trust need to make? What objectives should govern these decisions? Who are the stakeholders? And what processes will the trust use to enforce these decisions? And most importantly, what accountability mechanisms will the trust use to demonstrate trustworthiness and protect stakeholder interests and manage risks? All processes can go terribly wrong, and we need to start the design by making sure that it's fair and can self-correct like science does. So the method that most of the papers mentioned were basically deliberative methods, like, which is a fancy word for very thought through discussions between participants before any action is taken. So you would discuss between participants, involve a range of people with a clear task or purpose. Here are some examples of it. A real life implementation. I don't know if you guys have heard about the UK Biobank, but it's really exciting. And in 2006, it stewards genetic data from a huge number of people and takes the form of a charitable company with trustees. Another creative idea is the Facebook's Oversight Board Trust, which Facebook actually probably did to be a little less evil, because the point of it is to facilitate the creation, funding, management, and oversight of a structure that will permit and protect the operation of an oversight board for content decisions, whose purpose is to protect free expression by making principled, independent decisions about important pieces of content and by issuing policy advisory opinions on Facebook's content policies. They basically creatively use Delaware's extremely flexible purpose trust statute to make something separate from their company. So it can basically not be a part of the company, so it's separate from Facebook and can hold its content accountable in that way. And my friend Zarina Agnew is actually working on many different sorts of community building projects. One of them is experimenting with data trusts. It says here, we're piloting a brand new way of dealing with data, the abolition of private ownership of data, replaced by collective decision-making over the use of collectively produced data. All collected data and any intelligence that springs from it should be collectively owned by the community it is about and put to use for this community. A loss of privacy should never result in a loss of social power. In this way, we go beyond traditional models of informed consent for data. The project is still, it's in place. I will let you know the results if you're interested, but she is into many interesting abolitionist projects. I would highly recommend you check it out. So that's just the beginning. There are so many future possibilities that you can go from there because, hey, 12 minimum specifications, like a world of opportunity. Like an obvious one, I guess, is dynamic consent for data subjects, like in cases where data require consent for a collection, in which like you can, consent, basically you don't have to just do it one time. It's ongoing and it's in a way where you can like have like more specific flexible options for consenting. Like what if you want this but not that? That would be an option. Another is data traceability so that data trust can fully execute on patient consent withdrawal, bias monitoring, audits, and regulatory agency review. Yeah, with traceable data, you can actually hold data accountable. Sorry, data trusts people accountable. Standard and computable data use conditions and secure and auditable computing environments. Both extremely good for, say, repeatability of the research and also the basic accountability of the environment to make sure that the data is actually good data to use too. Public engagement that goes beyond informational transparency and into activities like co-design and deep involvement of data subjects and governance. I think co-design would be really interesting. I actually don't know exactly how that would be right now. I expect they would have some way for the population to give its voice in a way that counts as co-designing the data trust from the bottom up. But so far, we don't have any projects like that. Maybe Zarina is working on it. I don't know of any yet. So right now, there is funding from the UK to make your own data trust. If you go to that link, it has 3 criteria. Like this is what makes it count as a data trust so that you can apply, which is enable collective action, empowering individuals or groups to influence how data about them is used. Provide independent stewardship of data rights by a data trustee on behalf of the beneficiary of the trust, and create strong institutional safeguards to steward data use based on trustee fiduciary duties together with oversight mechanisms. Thank you so much. Are there any questions? Oh, thanks for the thumbs up, Krishna. I see that. Thank you, Sheena. I appreciate it. Okay. Yeah, you guys can ask anything. You can just unmute yourself and ask because these are the references. At any time, if you think of something, just ask because, or if you want to just know more about something too, like, I guess that's asking Angela. No one has any questions?
Hey Angela, it's
Yeah,
Shruti here. A
what?
really great presentation. I
Oh,
really liked it. It's really informative.
oh,
I
thank
just have a simple question. Like you just said that it's not just us who's responsible for our data privacy. People around us too are like almost equally responsible for that. But there are some people who tend not to understand the importance of data privacy. Like they'll be like, oh, so what if they have asked me some of like they're asking my location? So what will they do of that? Or such simple things they don't get it. So what? I mean, I believe that all the things which we are doing, like adding different privacies at different levels, all those legal obligations, is great. But I believe it's to some extent the enlightenment, or letting people know more about how data privacy is important would be the best, one of the best things we can do. So how, according to you, can we tell those people like what how much important data privacy is, in a very simple and subtle way that's understood by everyone, and so that they too to understand that it's not just their location that's being shared, but much more than that.
Yeah, the biggest issue right now is purely that the corporations are like there aren't that many laws that cover, say, internet actions, right? So like it's still a whole wild west out there regarding tech. And most people are just really ignorant about how like because like it makes sense if your daily life isn't affected by saying yes to like location sharing, you're not going to care. And I think the biggest thing is journalists or someone will have to like make it so to like show the tangible effects of like what will happen, do like show the science of what's most likely to happen if people don't stop caring. I mean, I don't have a plan on how that can happen. I do know that on average, people, unless, you know, people, they like, the one thing everyone has in common is probably self-preservation, but not like all the other values, right? So we would basically need to somehow incentivize people in the first place to care about this, because the reason it's hard right now is the same reason, like say climate change is kind of hard, because there are like corporations in power which don't want to be caught out for these things. I suppose the way I wanted to go about it was have some sort of like opt-in legal, like some sort of like community accountability processes that take these into account, so that community leaders would at least need to have the like incentive to care about, you know, the rest of them, right? Like we need people to be stakeholders and basically this sort of thing too. Yeah. And I don't know what governance or what policy per se needs to happen for people to have a stake in this, because right now I know that as long as people's say daily lives or profits aren't affected, it's still always going to be the minority of, you know, people who care, who will be doing something about it. And that probably will be enough for a cultural shift if those people, you know, end up in government, etc., or start their startups. All these are incredibly influential. But I don't see how it's possible for a huge cultural shift for the average Joe to go, hey, this is really important to happen without like a tangible change happening to them, you know, specifically. Or like, even if it's just like a friend saying, hey, this is really important. But I think even then it would be pretty difficult to like, you know, monopolies are big. So I'm sorry, that's a really good question. I wish I had a better answer.
Oh no, no, it completely makes sense because we all are like everyone's figuring out how to do that.
Yeah.
So it's completely.
Yeah.
And do you really think that these big organizations which we're talking about, they have a monopoly in the market, and they mostly affect smaller countries, you know, developing and underdeveloped countries, and that they're targeting more there. So what do you think should be the plan, like for people from like us, which we have not, like UK, the UK has its own, I mean, own laws and everything, and but the smaller developing countries, especially including India as well, we don't have such great laws.
Mm.
So, what according to you should be a suggestion for people like us who are from a country like that where we don't have laws, and a lot of people definitely, and a lot of profits these big giants are making up from here itself.
I
So,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh my gosh. Brilliant question. I love it. Like I actually was talking to someone about this earlier, but I was thinking about say like there would so the cool thing, so I got interested in data trust because I was interested in a new type of legal system in which I always thought it was very strange that the legal system you fall under is so arbitrary just based on where you happen to be born in. And that's really unfortunate for many people around the world who don't necessarily live in places that like have laws that help them, right? So I thought, okay, why don't people on the internet at least have some sort of like opt-in legal system in which like you, I mean, that's essentially what terms and services, terms and conditions are right now, right? Like you're saying, yes, in order to use Facebook, I agree to not be a jerk. But like Facebook obviously like doesn't actually care if people are jerks on the internet. Like if someone's like defaming someone else on the internet, like nothing's gonna happen to them, you know, like maybe they get banned if you're lucky, but otherwise no, like there's no like tiny little internet civil court to like give consequences to perpetrators, though someone is working on something called digital juries to fix that. But I was thinking for developing countries such as India and the like, where like the population, like there's like a growing, you know, at least a huge population. So like people could basically have some sort of like also opt in, like data governance, sorry, not data, like general governance, like agreement, like opting into a much lower stakes legal system where like people can like have some sort of restorative justice happen to for like social pacification and stuff. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Let me start over. Did that make any sense at all? Okay.
No, no, it's okay. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Basically, I was saying that like for developing countries, they cannot rely on corporations for their best interests because the people usually who rise to power in these are the power hungry, and unfortunately, like they're not necessarily the people you want in power over like huge inequalities like a developing nation, right? So like it's up to developing nations to like know by reputation like who is trustworthy and who deserves the power, and to like have something organized in which like there's some sort of like opt-in legal system for the community, for the people involved. Yeah, like I don't have really like an example of this other than the fact that this is kind of how, you know, businesses work, right? Like workplaces are kind of an example of like mini legal systems, except my idea of what a community legal system should be has a lot more to do with like either civil court or like model civil court, low stakes civil court, or restorative justice, you know, in which like the goal of it is to ensure that power is distributed equally and that people are informed. Because right now the issue is precisely that any like person uninformed like can give their consent to like a bunch of scary things they wouldn't actually consent to if they're informed. But with like community level governance, they would have to ensure the same way a data trust would, to like that everyone on board knows what's going on. So basically I got into data trust because I was interested in precisely that question. And I think for me, data trust is how I'm like handling my like sort of ideas of like community accountability and stuff. But that's pretty new. So that's just my idea. I'm sorry. Does that help?
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. No, no, it really does. I mean, it's a new thing. Everyone is yet again trying to figure out. And if it would have been that simple, it would have already been done. So let's continue scratching our heads about this, and hopefully we'll come with the answer someday.
Yeah, like for me, like I got into data trust because I was
Hmm.
like, oh my gosh, you know what? The US legal system is freaking stupid. Because, you know, I could go on about that. But basically, I was like, I will have to figure out a way to like basically with emerging technology, there's so much that like a bad actor could do
Right.
now if they really wanted. Oh, I'm sorry. Did someone else talk or uh okay, yeah, like I basically got into data trust because I wanted to try out a new type of like accountability, because the criminal justice system in the US does not actually make people better, does not make like societies better. It's terrible. Okay. So like I was like, you know what I want to do is like have some sort of way in which like the internet, the wonderful thing about the internet is that it leaves traces generally of like everything. You leave data everywhere. Yeah. And the good thing is that like people like this is the perfect like playground for like people to try, you know, restorative justice, right? Because restorative justice like teaches people what not to do. It helps like give consequences, even if it's just making sure the victim is healed. And that's like covers everything in one go that the US legal system doesn't do, and when it's even accessible. But right now the internet is a wild west, and there's almost nothing governing anyone from just being a freaking asshole on the internet, right? Like, so I got into data trust when I thought I want to try a new thing in which like I record as much of my life as possible. I don't use punishments except for like maybe like mini civil court type things for like, and everything that happens like it will be like the truth will be known. There wouldn't be like, so in US civil courts like often like they don't actually care about truth that much, like, and it's crazy how it happens, but there are so many laws that they have to follow. It's like it throws common sense out the window sometimes. But like I thought, okay, if I do this new thing, like it's called life logging, and I just make sure that like here are the clear rules, and no one can access any of the logs that I take, not even myself, like a lawyer has it. And if there's ever some dispute, like the lawyer can like check it, and then like we can use the data trust basically. Like the lawyer here would basically be my data trust. Does that make sense? I'm sorry, I get really passionate about this.
Oh no, we really love your passion. The way you talk about it, makes us feel that how much you are into this. So that's great. It's really nice to hear.
Thanks. That's so nice. Yeah. Do you have any questions though? I feel like I talk way too fast sometimes. Yeah. I guess it's not a question. Anyone else have any questions on anything here? Like,
I have a question. Hold on a second. I have two devices on the call.
oh, okay.
Sorry, I started on my phone.
Oh, that's okay.
I'm still not disconnected. Maybe give me a minute. Someone else might have a question.
Okay. Does anyone else have a question? No such thing as a stupid question. Forgive me if the answer is stupid though. Okay. Let's see. La, la, la. I think,
Well, okay, I'm mono now. I apologize. Yeah, this is Joe. Let's see if I can turn on my video. Okay, Angela, thank you for the presentation. It's very interesting. You had a slide that talked about possible arrangement in a data trust where the data was owned collectively.
oh, yeah.
Do you remember that?
Honestly, it's all about data being owned collectively, so I'm not actually
Okay.
sure
Oh,
what you're
okay.
talking
All right. So anyway, one of the terms that I was curious about and don't fully understand is that if the data is in a data trust, then it's owned collectively. Is it by all of the people whose data is in it?
Oh, so data commons is like all the data is there. Like it is basically owned by, so the idea is supposed to be you own your data. It's just that you happen to give it to some board you trust, but it's still your data. So yes, you always own your data and no one else. Well, I guess you could theoretically sell your data if you own it, and then someone else would own the data. But I don't think that's what like anyone's doing in the project. Like, but yeah, I guess it's
Okay. So you own your data that is in the trust.
yeah.
And there is not really collective ownership of that data. That was a misunderstanding of mine. Is that true?
It has
Okay.
basically collective influence, but you own your data. Like, because the only thing is that like the only problem with like the thing now is that what your data does affects other people. So that's why like you own your data, but other people tell you what you can't do with the data. So like sorry, that came out wrong. It basically makes sure that the way you handle your data like has everyone's consent too. You know what I mean? But you
So the governance of the data is collective.
yes, basically
Okay.
it's by either representatives or it can be collective. That's like data commons. Usually data trust is like you give it to someone, you know, like some people. Good question.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else? Anyone else gonna apply to make their own data trust now? Yeah. I can go over this if anyone has questions, like, or not. Okay. Alrighty. So if there are no other questions, thank you very much. Ooh. Okay. You guys can talk about anything too. Like you guys don't have to necessarily just ask about data trusts. I'm pretty open to giving my opinion on whatever it is.
Hi, so it's like more of a topic for discussion than a question.
Okay.
Since a person can like give out not only his or her own data but others' data as well. Like for example, WhatsApp, it takes permission for accessing your contacts, and that includes phone number of other people's. So in a way, we are giving other people's number to WhatsApp. Uh, so in cases like this, it's very like difficult to regulate because in general there is a perception that big corporations, WhatsApp, Facebook or Google are not going to do much harm with your data other than showing advertisement. But by any chance, if there is some like data breach, because no matter how secure a foundation is, there are still like chances of them being get hacked. And a similar thing happened with India where a fintech company was hacked. Its name was, I guess, Free Charge. And so how this can be regulated, because it's like virtually impossible to manage such a situation. Like you would only see a WhatsApp contacts of the person who gave you the access, and like pretty much everyone would be like willing to give the access. We just click on the button, and so I guess no one really thinks about before clicking the button. And there is a very good like a monologue on that in a series named Mr. Robot. So which reminds me, like everyone is like checking the box. So how to deal with it, because there's no other way than not check the box. If I have to use Gmail, then I have to check the box, and the terms and conditions are like not possible to read. Like these are thousands of words, thousands and sentences. So like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. Like how to deal with it.
I mean, that's the heart of the problem, right? It's not truly informed consent for all those people checking boxes.
Yeah.
I guess like the reason data trust was created was because we couldn't think of another way to deal with it the traditional way. Like because for most people, like again, like they have like I guess high trust, or they have no other option really. They want to like hang out with their friends. They're just gonna go whatever their friends are, and that's how these things
Yeah.
just start snowballing. Yeah. Um, I guess the way to deal with it right now, instead of fighting the existing reality, is to come up with a data trust version of it that has just the same number of benefits as all the monopolies use, or maybe could use like a personal data storage thing, so that, yeah, basically, to make the alternative more popular and more shiny, so that people would understand that, hey, like this gives me as many of the benefits that I need, along with like making me a responsible person for choosing it. Because like the way I see it, like there's basically, I mean, technically, like there's basically nothing that would make a startup that uses, say, like responsible data trust, etc., like to not have it be as popular as one of the giant mega corporations right now that, like WhatsApp or something. It's like the same question that she said before, like the average person isn't going to understand or care about these abstract notions that don't affect their everyday lives. But if you can make a product that is just as shiny and just as useful and just as hyped up as any of the others, but also designed in a way that like people can trust you, data trust stuff, like, then I'm pretty sure that that would, number one, like catch on, just because that's, success. There's probably a formula for that if you're lucky, like, and also like, but once it does catch on, it'll probably be there to stay as like an existence proof for other like you know, slowly the other like crappy companies could become obsolete, as this new example shows to be much more, much better for the long run. Yeah. Like, I'm sorry, did that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
It makes
Angela,
sense.
I don't know if you've been hearing me. I've been having trouble with my other machine.
Oh, I did
So
not hear you at all.
You haven't heard anything I've said.
Nothing. And you were wearing a mask, so I did not know you were talking at all. Like,
Okay, so sorry. Yeah, first of all, we had a question in the chat. It was just basically, thank you for bringing up the cultural issues on this. I think that's a very important thing to consider. Another thing is if you could go back to your slides to the definitions of data trusts.
okay, let me share my slides.
Okay.
Oh, here. Okay, there are a few. Which one?
The second one, the third, slide 3.
This one?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is the many working definitions. So I think this is important to know, like kind of how these things are structured. So you have one definition, which is to provide independent fiduciary stewardship. And then another one, which is the set of relationships. So it's more systematic and has more of a, so I guess when you view these different definitions, what do you think people are sort of working towards? Do you think it's like something that's just a legal tool, or because we've been talking about the cultural issues, do you think people are viewing it more broadly, or what is the literature on this? I know you had some references at the end of your talk. How are people approaching this?
Right now, so when I read a paper, like they usually give their definition of data trust right in the paper, and that's just what I go by. And I actually don't necessarily remember what each paper meant, so I mostly like assume that it's talking about the vaguer definition of a data trust provides independent fiduciary stewardship of data, because that's actually like that was what. So I came up with the idea of data trusts independently, and that's like what I thought I would use it for. I feel like when it comes to like the first definition of, so there seems to be two types of people interested in like data trust stuff. And it's of course tech ethics type people who care about it, and like the big data type people who are scientists who care about like research, being like, yeah, so it's both of these types of people. And I feel like they're working basically towards the same goals. And I think the definition that we used here is just like data is placed on the control of a board to look after the interests of beneficiaries, which is the vaguer one. But I think over time, the goal is to like, for a lot of people interested in data trust, is to have like accurate data that they can use to like make their societies, better or something, right? So I think that's why that it's probably going to slowly, as like, right now it's like an ill-defined concept. Like there are very few data trusts out there. There's probably more and more coming up. Like there were very few just a few years back, but like hopefully like more and more of it is like, the point of it mostly is like the data, the big data. Like, so I think over time, the main like working definition of data trust might like narrow down to something that's like more systematic, like a set of relationships underpinned by a repeatable framework,
Yeah, so this is something that's new and something that people are starting to adopt. I think this is great that, you have this sort of, so go a couple slides forward.
Oh, sorry, forward. Which one?
Going forward, I want to see something here. So you talk about this data privacy part here. You go through this tree here that you just showed.
It was a tree.
Yeah, the decision tree. A little bit.
Oh, here.
Right
Gotcha.
there. So this is sort of a contingency tree, and you're asking the question, has data already been collected? So we're talking about, a yes or no set of decisions. So this is something that people could use to give themselves insight into how to, deal with the data that they've collected. So say I'm a developer and I'm collecting data, and I want to adhere by this data trust principle. So I have to ask these questions about the data. So it's, does the data give rise to rights, or does this collected data give rise to personal rights? So it's personal versus general rights, I imagine. And then you go through these steps and you pick a data commons configuration that's right for you. Is that basically it?
Yeah. I'm sorry. Can you repeat your question? I'm kind of confused.
Oh, okay, sorry. So now that I've collected the data, I have to ask these questions.
Yeah.
And so I followed these contingencies down to the end
Yeah.
where then I find like what kind of data trust is right for me. So there are different options. And it's just that one of these options is the best one. We have to ask ourselves all these questions.
Yeah.
And it's either yes or no. And
The funniest
that's
part,
how,
yeah, the funny part is it doesn't even tell you like which data trust is right for you. Like it just tells you, are you looking for a data trust or something else? Like it's not even like which data trust. It's because like right now it doesn't like, so there are not like there are suggestions, but there's not like a flow charty thing I found of like this is the kind of data trust you need. Though now that I think about it, that would be really cool to like make one day. Yeah.
yeah, I
Right.
think this would be a nice research question, or at least a way to like untangle some of this is to say, you know, this is a tool that someone could use to manage data. Okay, so if I'm, because there are a lot of gray areas in data collection, right? So if you're collecting data and you're saying, okay, you know, I have this data, I don't know whether it's like something that I want to keep private or whether it's something that is anonymous and I can share it. And of course, you know, in research, you do have ethics boards that will make that decision, but it's not like automatic. They have to weigh it on a case by case basis. So, you know, for a developer, say a software developer, it's even worse because they don't necessarily have the training in these ethics, you know, these situational ethics to give them an idea of where to go. So I think that would be a great idea to have like a tool that one could consult and say, this is the best option.
Yeah, that would be so good. It's so sad that software engineers aren't given that like training just because like, you know, like it's so good. They have like the logic that could be used to like help with these, you know, very nebulous like ethics is very difficult, right? But like that has to come with like the thinking that comes from like being able to like have almost like parallel processing of like everything that's going on to like consider, like you can't just go from A to Z when it comes to ethics, but you always need the ability to like have that logical process in every single, you know, solution you have. So like it's definitely true that like, I'm sorry, you're just right. I don't really know what to say. I agree with you.
Well, why don't we, does anyone else have any other questions? I know that we had a lot of discussion here and a lot of information here. So if we have any other questions, then it will be the time to ask.
You guys can ask anything, even if it's like,
Yeah.
hey, Angela, like, what's your name?
Well, let's go forward a couple more slides here. Oh,
Huh?
did Krishna have a
Let me
question?
look at the chat. Sorry, what?
Yeah, someone else was also saying something, so they can continue. I'll ask later.
Oh, that's okay. You can ask. I have nothing else.
Yeah, go ahead and ask.
So, like you were mentioning about judicial system, and I've also like we me and Bradley and Jesse also, you know, looked in bias, and we were working on something, and it gave the reference of compass, that algorithm that is used to you know, generate whether person should get bail or not, and there was some racial filtering going on, and since that's something that should not happen, but if we like make a authority or give a certification to every algorithm to we stamp them, okay, they are free of bias or not free of bias, but there are chances of its like intellectual property to be getting out in public. So how to manage that? If what do you think, like uh, how to check whether something is appropriate, is not having biased or stereotypes or prejudice, as well as maintaining the dignity of the intellectual property? because if someone's need to like scan your encode, they need to, get to know it's working.
Oh, so like, okay, I see. Your question is
Th-
how do I like,
Does it make sense? Like, does the question make sense?
so you want to know how they can evaluate for bias while keeping like intellectual property rights and privacy stuff like,
Yeah. Because for me, I the work that I've come through and the things that I've worked on, and according to me, that like that's not possible. They can only be mm, like some agreement between the party giving evaluating the algo and the corporation making the algo. There can be some MOU or something that they don't share the property, but like nothing else can be done for as far as I know. Like there is nothing that you can use to safeguard the IP. So
I see. Yeah, that makes sense. I guess when like technology reaches its limitations, the only thing it can do is just like rely on like incentives and like hoping people have the wisdom to like design systems enough so that like even if there is like a intellectual property issue, like people wouldn't like take advantage of it or do something wrong with it or whatever. Huh. I don't actually know the technology behind I did read, have you read Ruha Benjamin's book, Race After Technology, by any chance?
no, I have not.
You probably would enjoy it. Yeah, it does mention basically precisely that. And I don't actually know exactly, like, I am not a lawyer. I don't know how to like go about with like the issue of like intellectual property. I do think probably for the overwhelming number of cases, like contracts with like the right incentive structures are enough, because if you are choosing, the right people for the job, you usually wouldn't end up with like at least too huge of like, terrible consequences with like the right assurance contracts and stuff. But I don't have any tech related ideas on how to fix that. And I don't know exactly the law behind it.
Yeah, well, that's something that, is, we don't have an expert on that here, but that's something we could follow up on as well in terms of the actual letter of the law. And of course, it's different between countries. Could you go to the last slide? I just wanted to go over your references here. I think that if you want to know more, I think you can look at some of these references. I've put this slideshow on Figshare, and if you're interested, please contact me and I can share the link with you. We have a number of different resources here, from digitalcommoners.org to Social Observatory, Social Science Observatory, which is socialobservatory.space. We have some references on data privacy and security, and some other up and coming references that I'm sure there will be more literature on this as we're going along. And so are you planning to do any more research on this area? Is this something that you're preparing some more things on in the future?
Well, yes, I actually am trying to get funding for my own data trust, for my own data trust projects. I want to do more research on like, so right now I'm doing a lot of research related to honesty and what like incentivizes honesty in both the individual and groups along with privacy. And there was some really interesting things like the openness to people sharing like private information of theirs is dependent on the number of people that information will go to instead of who it is shown to. So the larger the number of people, the more likely the person will say no. And it doesn't even matter like who it is. It just matters like how many. And that's just like a quirk of humans that I did not expect. I want to do more research on data trusts because I'm not entirely sure like the ways that like, so like I'm really interested in accountability processes that the data trust would have. And those I'm hoping would be able to create, say, like almost like an accountability system, a like opt-in legal system that I mentioned way earlier, which gave me the idea of data trust first. Yeah. So
Yeah,
that's
well,
probably-
thank you for your talk. It was very good. And next week, we'll be hosting Yun Huang, who's from the iSchool here. And she's going to be talking on chatbots and skill building. So this is going to be something that I think will tie into Rockwire's work on trying to incorporate AI into some of the apps and some of the capabilities and talents that we have. So I know that this talk didn't really tie directly into Rockwire, but I think we can think about how it might tie into some of what's going on. And I think, especially with data use and data privacy, I think those are some open issues. So if people have any questions or comments, please email me or Angela. I can put you in touch with Angela. Yes. And thank you for attending.
Mhm. Don't
Bye.
worry about asking any questions. I'm very friendly and happy to teach.
Yeah.
Bye.
Have a
Thanks
good
for
day.
having me.
Thank you.